Hello, class. I hope your summer is going well and that this class is coming along for you. I've enjoyed reading your papers and your reflections. Yeah, I really thank you for taking some of these issues to heart and to ponder them. You know, we've studied about history and voices in the past, but today I want to say we're all producing history. History is happening today. People in the future will look back to 2020 and have a lot to say about what happens. And so it's one thing to look at it in the past, but it is also here in the present. And as I'm looking over the lesson for today on King's letter that he wrote from the Birmingham jail in April 16, 1963. Yeah, I was 19 years old. And that was my birthday, by the way. 19 years old when he wrote that letter. Considering the turmoil that we see our country in today over racial injustice, it is good to take time in this class to reflect on how we got here. It's been 57 years since King wrote the letter from the Birmingham jail. I hear and see some of the same issues being raised today that gave birth to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Racial segregation in public education has been illegal for 66 years in the United States. Yet American public schools remain largely segregated and unequal, with profound consequences for students, especially students of color. In 1954, Thurgood Marshall successfully argued before the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka that the separate but equal notion was unconstitutional for the American public schools and educational facilities 66 years ago. It paved the way for integration and was a major victory for the civil rights movement. Yet we still see racial segregation in many schools in America. It was August 28, 1963. I was in my early 20s, and I heard King give his talk on the mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and declare a vision of a dream that all people would be treated equally, that we would treat each other as an I and thou and not as an I and it. Let's fast forward to today and visualize where segregation and inequality in education exists. And I have placed in Course Den a chart to show where there's an unequal distribution of black students and white students across the country. And if you will look at that, you can see where in the south and east it is exaggerated there. Let's reflect for a moment. If King were here today, what would he say? What would he say about what is happening in the country right now? What have we learned from the past to help guide us through the challenges we face today? What responsibility do you and I have to meet the critical issues that affects everyone? King's message to the church leaders and the middle class was, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. He called it a network of mutuality. There is a word that describes this. It's called interdependability. And that is, if one student is harmed in the class, is traumatized, receives a racial slur, or is degraded in some way, it affects the whole classroom. Other students see it. So, what are you going to do about this issue? What am I going to do about this issue? Are we, as educators, going to use our voice to address this issue? Or are we going to be like the church leaders of old that were confronting King about being too radical in his approach to issues that were being opposed and suppressed? Rabbi Abraham Heschel said, "The opposite of good is not evil. The opposite of good is indifference." We all need to pause, reflect, and take responsibility for bringing change to our schools and to our country. This quote, it's been around and you may have seen it. First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists. I didn't speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And you could go on with other lists, and at the end it says, then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. I hope that with this lesson that it will awaken a sense of responsibility in each of you, and that you have a voice. You can make a difference. Too often I hear kids say, because of the bullying that has gone on in schools, that teachers don't listen. Well, maybe we can have a new sensitivity and awakening here to be sensitive to what kids are going through and to make a difference, because they do look up to you and admire you. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading your responses.